about this because you're not planning for a trip. You're planning for a new life of which you have no idea about, right? So, I mean, you're basically blowing up your existence, your steady job, your friend circle, your home, like it's all going into question. And I was freaking out a little bit the last night because it all sounds so glamorous, and I was clearly excited by it. But the back of my head, I'm like, what if this is a terrible idea? Right. What if we get sick? Rob, we want to kill each other, like whatever. I was like, I reserve the right to bail. If this isn't there's too much unknown. I cannot in my mind 100% commit to 16 months. Don't think of me as a failure if maybe I want to come home. That didn't cross my mind for 1 second once we were on the road. It was month 3 and I was like, yeah, we're probably never coming.
Welcome, everybody, to the Glamping podcast powered by the American Glamping Association. And welcome to this week's episode. I am your host, Ruben Martinez. So have you ever been on a trip and it's going well, maybe a bit too well, where you've forgotten about all your day-to-day responsibilities or what's at home waiting for you? And at some point in the trip, you look around and maybe you look at the people or the person you're traveling with and you say, I wish we didn't have to go home, or let's figure out how to stay a little bit longer. That moment for me is typically if I'm sitting on a beach, maybe enjoying an adult beverage or two. I love the ocean and don't get enough of it, so when I'm around it, that thought definitely enters my head. How do I get more of this? The world's a big place. How do I see it all? Well, today we talk with two people who will probably make you a bit jealous. They left on their honeymoon, and 8 years later, they're still on it. So let that sink in for a second. They have been traveling the world for 8 years straight. And more importantly, they figured out how to make a career out of it. Yep, that's right. They are professional travelers and expert glampers. On today's episode, we talk to Mike and Ann Howard of the brand Honeytrek, the couple that is on the world's longest honeymoon. We are now in a work from anywhere instead of a work from home world, and they talk to us about what they have been up to, what they've learned throughout their travels, and more importantly, how to travel simply. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. I want to welcome Mike and Ann Howard, the couple behind Honeytrek, the couple that left on their honeymoon in 2012 and never came home. Hello. How are you guys?
Hey.
Oh, wonderful.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we've known each other for quite some time now. What was it? 1945, 44?
Do not reveal my age.
Yeah, we look good.
Right.
We look good for being born in the 40s. And I want to be able to jump into the travel blog, you as not only travel experts, but glamping experts, you as journalists and authors of the two books. You're also advisors to the American Glamping Association, and we will get into all that fun stuff. But what I thought would be helpful for the listeners at this point is to maybe take a trip back in time, all the way back to 1942. But when, growing up, can you give us a sense of what traveling was like for you two growing up? Was it road trips? Was it camping? Was it glamping? Was it nothing? Was it something that you discovered more later in life? Can you fill us in more on what that looks like?
Yeah. Well, I can start a little bit. We didn't have electricity, so there was that, or running water. No, I'm just kidding. So I grew up in Northeast PA in the Poconos, so pretty outdoorsy. I grew up along the Appalachian Trail.
Ironically, it's the honeymoon capital of the world.
Also,
they
the
claimed
honeymoon,
that
yes.
for a while. No direct connection, but funny.
That's not where you honeymooned? That's not where you
We did actually.
We
started our honeymoon in the Poconos at a Relais and Chateau property, the only one in Northeast PA. We found it, and but no, I love PA. Love the wilderness. I was just thinking about it yesterday, kind of about my upbringing that, I was born in 77, so I'll date myself there. But for my entire childhood, until I went to university there, or maybe a little bit in high school, there wasn't an internet. So there was little video games. You'd play Nintendo maybe against my brother, but I wasn't spending hours and, whatever the stat is, like 400 minutes a day in front of a screen. I might watch maybe 30-minute sitcom, Dukes of Hazzard maybe at night. And on the weekend, maybe I get one or two cartoons or whatever. But the rest of the time, I was outside. I was building tree forts. I was riding my bike. Like, there was so much outdoors time that I think kids are really missing these days. And that kind of just, gave me a little tear as I was driving down the road, just thinking about how different their lives are now. But
that's where glamping comes.
That is where glamping. And as far as travel for me, I did a little bit of international travel because my dad was in real estate and he would do projects down in the Caribbean. So if I was lucky or it was coincided with the summer, I might go spend a month down in the Bahamas or Bermuda or Jamaica, which was really cool. But when we were back home, we did a lot of camping trips. So I don't know if we would necessarily call it glamping. I'm sure my mom would not, but it wasn't a plastic tent either. It was like, and we still have it. My dad's since passed away, but we've got this huge canvas tent. It was like a 12 by 12, like straight wall. I got to find a picture of it, like blue and red tent. And we would go out and, have some fun in the woods. And that's kind of what my earliest memories, just as a little, 3
and
or 4
actually, your mom is quite the city girl, married more of an outdoorsy guy. So I bet she glamped it up a bit. Yeah.
Yep. How about you?
My mom was a flight attendant as her first job out of school. So there was a travel bug that naturally came to me. And, but I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in Hollywood. My dad he doesn't know how to pitch a tent. That was not a part of our childhood. There was no camping going on. The one time we did, it snowed on us, game over for camping in my family. So yeah, it was a pretty urban existence, but at the same time, any money we had went right to travel. Like we would, take trips to Europe and, that was made of value in my family more than, fancy cars or new clothes. It was like money goes towards travel. So I carry that value as well. And, my first international trip was actually, I just heard Bobby Frisch's podcast. My first international trip was also to Japan as a 7-year-old and very impactful, informative, because it was so different from what I knew, because my parents were living there. My dad lived there in the 80s and then together they lived there in the 70s. So we were going to move there. We looked at schools and houses, like game on, we were moving to Japan. But we didn't work out. But either way, I was like, wow, there's a big world out there. Like I never forgot that. So, and then us started dating. I mean, our first Valentine's we spent together. We snuck into Cuba. I mean, we like adventure. Like we love travel, and we realized like maybe we're really compatible for this. And
I'm definitely going to want to hear that story about sneaking into Cuba here later on, and maybe we can have a guidebook of international border hopping. Afterwards. So it's safe to say that there was several travel experiences that maybe even, at the time you weren't aware, but they were somewhat formidable, probably planted some seeds. As you look at your younger self, maybe pre-high school, kind of middle school, can you give us a sense of kind of where you're at? If we were to approach you as your 12-year-old self now and say, hey, growing up, you're going to be an expert traveler and a world traveler and an expert in glamping. Do you think your younger self would have believed it? Or were you on a track to do something completely different that if we approached you with that, you'd say, no way, you're crazy?
I think I can speak for both of us that Ann has some fun high school travel experiences, which were a lot deeper than I think I went abroad to Europe twice during my high school for like a little, but like a very fortunate, like 10 days in Italy and then another one in London. And those were very formative, but they weren't deep. It was kind of like, cool, go with your friends, go abroad, see a new culture. But I didn't leave that thinking, wow, I need to like dive into the world. And even during college, I maybe went abroad once or twice during my whole university. And I didn't think, wow, like I need it almost, I don't know when it struck in us, but neither of us.
You met me, obviously.
Yeah.
And
we weren't like dreaming to travel the world, even up until a year before we left. We weren't thinking, wow, like we need to see the whole world.
I don't know. I feel like, well, I studied abroad when I was 15, and I was like, I fell in love with Spanish and felt like this is key to other cultures. And I was like, I want more of this. And I studied abroad in Seville, Spain. Mm-hmm. And if I would have thought we were going to do this, I knew I always wanted to be a writer. Like as a little kid, I was like writing poems and, mm-hmm. I just thought that was my calling, whether, I'm amazing at it or not. I just knew it was for me. And so writing and I worked for interior design magazines later on in New York. So I kind of had that writing track, and to parlay it into travel, I was like, these are the stories I want to tell. Like this, like resonates more than how to decorate with pillows. Though I do know how to decorate with pillows and write a darn good story about it. But it felt so much more meaningful to see, how cultures interact and
sure.
It's such for self-reflection.
And so what career path were you on, let's say beginning in college, end of college, or during that time frame? What paths were you on?
My path, I went to Carnegie Mellon, so I was probably one of the less smart people, let's say, in my entire class, because I was on the business side and I was surrounded by tons of computer scientists and chemical engineers. And I actually, myself and one other computer scientist and another business major started a website, a small social network that we ran from 1997 until 2009. So
like 13
Original.
years.
Look at you.
Five of those were before Facebook or MySpace launched. So we started that, ran that in New York City. So that was my kind of career, was social media, more on the ad sales side, but building communities, growing communities, and then marketing them. And to reverse your previous question of would I imagine it back then where I was, I would say if I had to talk to my 12-year-old self or freshman year of high school self, I would tell that self how, because before I said, oh, well, I didn't dream of traveling the world, partly because I didn't know anyone who did it or read any books about how amazing it was. But now that I've done it, I can say it's been the single greatest thing of my entire life. And if you told me, if I could tell this 13-year-old kid or 12-year-old kid, you have a choice right now to have $2 million and work a 9-to-5 job until you're 65 and then maybe have a heart attack and never, or you'll be scraping by, but you should go see the world. I would choose see the world, every day, because it's so much more impactful and important than money or a ski house or any kind of material wealth or status in your friend circle or community. All of that stuff is trivial compared to what you can learn from like really seeing the world in a deep way.
Yeah. And I think, glamping, I feel like that's why we connect with it as a travel style too, is I feel like people are making lifestyle changes. The people who are starting these camps are not doing because they see ka-ching dollar signs. And you can have a very successful glamping camp, but you have to do it. Same with us being travel writers. You can't get into it for the money, right? You have to get in for the love, for the love of the outdoors, for the love of other people, for the love of sharing a little piece of yourself and, learning from others. So that's where I see that as a glamping connection. But in terms of like how we took our jobs and did this, we didn't start Honeytrek for money. We met playing on a volleyball team together. And
let's walk through that. How did you guys meet and when was that?
2006. We were both in New York. I was actually living in Hoboken, New Jersey, much to Anne's sister's chagrin.
She's like, it'll never work because I lived in Manhattan. Just call it off now.
She was 1.5.
The E train is a mess.
Yeah, she was 1.5 miles away, and that was way too far for like a New York City girl to go.
Long distance relationship.
Yeah, 2 trains, a bus. Oh, forget it.
But we got introduced from a mutual friend to play semi-competitive volleyball, 2v2 beach volleyball. So we played that for a full season. And then at the end of that, it was a camping trip, which Comfortably Wild kicks off with the story of us on a camping trip that turns into a disaster. It starts raining. we're like sleeping in wet sleeping bags. Like the flaps are all breaking. Like the campfire won't light.
And this is like our first date. He's really trying. He's put so much thought into making this really fun camping trip. And it is like storming,
you're like,
wind,
of all the
it,
chances.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
And then, but how this story goes is basically like, we had our first kiss in that soggy tent. And, but the whole thing was like, next year, can we get a cabin? And that was
every year since we've been in a nice cabin or a little glamping tent when we go
all
rafting.
the fun in the outdoors, but I have a roof in this time. So, yeah.
Right. So let's fast forward a little bit. You guys have that unique date. Somehow it obviously wasn't a complete disaster because here you are now. And you fast forward and you're getting married and you're thinking about this honeymoon. Was a honeymoon soon after the wedding? Did you guys kind of walk us through where you were at that point in time as you're planning the honeymoon that eventually obviously turns into a lot longer of a honeymoon than you expected or would have guessed, but kind of walk us through the initial plans of the honeymoon.
Yeah, we basically, when we got engaged and started thinking about where do we want to go on this honeymoon, like most people do, it's a big time to splash out, get a few extra days off from work, spend a little bit extra money than you normally would. And we each took a couple Post-its and started writing down and putting them on the map of where we wanted to go. And by the end of this little session, we could barely see the map because there was just Post-it notes all over the world. and we were like, how can we even hope to, even if we went to one of these places every year for the rest of our life, we could never take all these Post-it notes off and truly see the world. So we kind of decided that night that we would go on a 1-year honeymoon was the initial plan. And we wanted to be on the road within 1 year of our wedding. So we needed some time to save, some time to get our, paperwork in order and like let our jobs. We both actually, I gave my job a 12-month notice because I had just signed a big client deal and I signed the deal saying
you went into your honeymoon and told your work that I'll be back in 12 months.
Yeah, we both did. And both of our companies were like, we applaud this trip. We wish we were doing something similar. We've got a job for you when you return. So that made it very easy to pull the ripcord that we knew we had a safe reentry. We actually signed, by the time we left, it turned into a 16-month honeymoon, and we signed a 16-month lease with our renters. We were that confident we were coming home.
Because clearly that would be enough. 16 months, that's a long time, right? But like we, absolutely fell in love with the world and, how much we were just, we were learning and growing every day. And it never got old. 8 years later, we're somehow still not tired. Because we feel invigorated by travel. It's like always changing and keeps us on our toes.
So you have that conversation with your work. You've got 16 months planned out. You've got somebody to take over a 16-month lease. You're dead set. You're going. You have everything planned. And you're on the honeymoon. And was there a point early on in the first few days, weeks, or months where you kind of looked at each other and said, maybe this was too long? Or did you look at each other early on and realize early that it was too short?
Well, there was a lot. It wasn't like, we called the travel agent to plan a 16-month trip, right? There were so many unknowns. You cannot.
Although we do help people plan trips now.
We do.
We are a long-term trip planner. If anybody's thinking of going, we do consult and help people do it. But that wasn't around when we left. So.
No. So there were so many unknowns about this because you're not planning for a trip. You're planning for a new life of which you have no idea about, right? So you're basically blowing up your existence, your steady job, your friend circle, your home, like it's all going into question. And I was freaking out a little bit the last minute because it all sounds so glamorous and I was clearly excited by it. But the back of my head, I'm like, what if this is a terrible idea? Right. What if we get sick, robbed? We want to kill each other, like whatever. Like I was like, I reserve the right to bail. Like if this isn't there's too much unknown. I cannot in my mind 100% commit to 16 months. Don't think of me as a failure if maybe I want to come home. That didn't cross my mind for 1 second once we were on the road. That was like, so early on.
So you would say then by month 3, you guys realized that 16 months was an unrealistic time frame for you.
Yeah. We didn't know quite at the 3-month mark, we didn't know Honeytrek would be successful enough to help fund it indefinitely. But we knew we wanted to stay longer. And then I would kind of say around like a year in, we had started to write for other people. We started writing for honeymoons.com and eventually started writing for glamping.com, which is kind of how we got deeper into this community. And then we knew that because traveling is way cheaper, people think our lives is 52, 1 week vacation. So they multiply it in their mind. They're like, okay, $3,000 a week for me and my family to go away times 52 weeks. Like, you guys are crazy, but it's not like that at all.
Or you're millionaires. And no, we're not. We actually are just very savvy travelers, and we know how to kind of like have fun in any scenario and do things affordably, but have big experiences at the same time.
Yeah.
So you guys you're in this process, you've gone past that 3-month mark where you realize, hey, it might be a lot longer than 16 months. At a year, it sounds like after a certain period of time, you start engaging in some activities that maybe shift the mindset that, hey, this could actually be a business. Was it the writing part on the blogs that really triggered that? Did you guys take a step back and then say, hey, Honeytrek is something that we need to then take a step back and do now? Or was it a gradual progression? Can you kind of walk us through the mindset of this is shifting and bleeding from we're just going on a honeymoon to, hey, we can make this not only longer, but we can build a business out of this?
Yeah. And there's many different wings. I mean, you have to wear a lot of hats. I mean, at the heart of it, we are travel bloggers. That's how this began. And, so writing has been a bread and butter of this. But
for our website and other sites.
Yes. But then, a big tipping point was National Geographic asked us to write a book about couples adventure travel. They'd never touched the topic. They saw us looking at, romantic travel in a whole different way. It was about life experiences and not, rose petals on the bed. And that was a huge break for us. And to go, I don't know, I've never written a book, but if Nat Geo says we should, yes, we can. We will do that and we'll figure it out. So that was a huge labor of love. It was taking our first 5 years on the road and distilling it down to our 75 favorite places around the 7 continents and the best piece of couples travel advice for other people to get out there, and the budgeting and the travel hacking. So that's kind of like that was a big piece. So that helped us focus to have the long lead of this book is coming out in 2 years. And we're going to keep travel as our main gig. And
I think aside from how we made the money, I think one of the reasons that we're still going and that we've been successful is that to some degree, by some standards, maybe not my mom's standards or the IRS's standards, but the way is that we have like an addiction to travel, like to meeting people, to telling their story, to searching out a new unique place or a new angle on a place or a new property, and like finding that addiction is all you need. And then you find a way to make the money to feed that. And if you can get paid to write about amazing destinations or share them on social media and tell stories that way, all the better. But there's so many other ways to do it, right? People that travel long term, I would say less than 1/10 of them make their money writing about travel or doing travel. They're either accountants or coders or designers. They find other ways to make money while they're traveling, which is beautiful because then it feeds their travel bug and they're also artsy or whatever they need to do to pay the bills. We just happen to...
I'd say our biggest skill and our secret to much of our success is knowing how to live, which I think applies completely to somebody starting a glamping property, is to know how to live simply, right? When we left for our trip, we pared down to the bare essentials. We sold most of our stuff and said, what do we need to be happy and healthy? And it wasn't that much stuff. We literally lived off of what was in a 60-liter backpack for 2 years and felt like sometimes we had too much stuff, even in just 60 liters. You need so little. And also when you get some perspective, especially we can be very sheltered Americans when you start going to developing countries, you're like, wow, people are doing just fine on, some people end up running water, So what are we complaining about? So it's getting a real perspective to simplify your life and what really matters. And we consider ourselves successful. And I'm gonna tell you, we don't make a lot of money, but we think we're successful because it's more than enough for our, to keep us happy. And so, always dream big and aim high, but also manage expectations, because you don't want to, you're not a failure if you don't make $1 bajillion in your first year or ever. But if you're making enough to fulfill your dream, you are wildly successful.
Right. And as the shift, I was to say, just, as the shift has been over the last several years of experiential based travel and the science that's actually now catching up to it, saying, backing the fact that people are happier and they're more fulfilled when they are prioritizing experiences versus things. So that's not an assumption, right? It's actually backed by science. And so now, kind of shifting over to the glamping aspect, and you guys, I would say with full confidence, are glamping experts. You guys have been to countless glamping operations, glamping camps. You've been to countless countries and different unique operations. Do you feel that was just a natural fit for how you were traveling? Was there maybe something along the road that just drew you to, hey, from now on, we're really going to prioritize glamping and outdoor stays versus something else? Can you walk us through how you got to really prioritize glamping maybe versus other types of travel?
Yeah. I mean, well, as I mentioned before, in the beginning of our trip, we wrote for honeymoons.com. It was fully unpaid. We just volunteered our services and they volunteered their name so we could open a lot of doors when we didn't have a lot of traffic on our website or social media followers. So that opened the doors to a lot of honeymoon properties.
I wish they gave us carte blanche to go, you're a young couple, what's cool. And we found ourselves picking glamping places. So it wasn't that I'm going to look for glamping. They just seemed to be the most unique and creative, and we're outdoorsy people. And we're like, it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, like Patagonia was one of our first ones, right? Camp Patagonia. We spent, one of the first
That's true, yeah.
honeymoon stays we had was down there.
And then we stayed at 15 different safari camps in Africa of all different grades, and just that connection in nature just it felt so much more like rewarding and unique than, checking into room 107 on, amongst a bunch of other vacationers. And it didn't feel personal. I think we really liked the personal aspect of glamping, the outdoor side of things.
And then it tied in the experiences, to your point earlier, that experience is worth more than stuff. Like, it's one thing to stay at a very nice hotel and then go to the concierge and say, what should I do? And then he's like, oh, I'll book you something tomorrow. The bus will come. It'll pick you up. It'll drive you 2 hours. You'll hike some waterfall, have a nice meal and a beer, and the bus will drive you home. And then you can eat dinner in the lobby. Like, that, to us, it has its place, but it's very manufactured. When you can go stay in the woods, no matter how rustic it is. And that's one tip to glamping property owners that think they need to have everything so top luxury and that people expect it to be pristine and beautiful. I mean, it's nice to have some decorations, but focus a lot on the experience that those guests are going to have. And when you can go and stay out near that waterfall and hike there, with a guide in the day, and then at night they'll say, cool, here's a little picnic basket. If you want to go back, the route, go back and have a little dinner and a bottle of wine at that same waterfall and watch the stars come out. That is so much cooler than this pre-book from the concierge experience. And we just kind of became addicted to those experiences, the properties, as Ann said, the owners sharing their stories. And
so you've obviously seen a lot and you've been to a lot of places. What do you two personally gravitate towards when you're looking at a glamping experience? So if it's not for maybe writing, if it's not on the business end of things, for you personally, if you were going to go to someplace this weekend or someplace in the near future, is there a checklist of whether it's the type of experience, type of structure, type of amenities? Is there certain things that you not only prefer, but almost have to have?
On a high level of that, say most people start with someone's website, right? We always look at their about us page, because I want to know who's behind this. I want to know where this came from. I want to feel connected with that person and the type of people that might be there. So that, I think, is sometimes overlooked, and people kind of try and sound bigger than they are on their about us and more important than they are. I want it to be personal and friendly and feel like I'm going to be buds with this person. It's going to be a good time, whether even I meet them or not, but it's that vibe. So we're looking for the right vibe. And especially because glamping tends to be, you're not just like having the bus pick you up and take you somewhere. You're going to spend some time there. So you want to feel like it's got a good personality to it.
On the structure side, I think people have this preconceived notion, some people do, that glamping is just a canvas wall tent like the safari style tent, or, some people think, it's a dome or it's a tree house or whatever, or some people even think it's a trailer that's nicely decorated. There's one genre of glamping that's that. And for us, glamping, we use such a broad definition of glamping that I love exploring or booking or checking into a new structure, because there's probably 30 or so different structures if you get into some of the nuances out there. And I think people get in their head, okay, I need to do this. If I'm going to go glamping, I need to be in this certain thing, or it must be a tree house because I hear they're so cool and they're the biggest thing booked on Airbnb. But there's really cool things about other ones that you might not think about. Sleeping in a Conestoga wagon is really awesome. And it is, especially when it moves every night or every day and gets you to a new spot. Like there's to me, it's the variety of structures and seeing all the little quirks and kind of seeing how people decorate them and tell a story around them.
And we're very active people. So we've seen all types of glamping, and some are kind of set up more like vacation rentals. So there's totally time and place for that, especially if you are going to have it just be like friends catching up after a long time and all you want to do is sit around the fire and hang. Totally a time for that. We're really active people, so I want to see what's on offer there. Like even something as basic as like, we've got bocce and, horseshoes. Like that's even little things like that are such like a cheap and cheerful addition for glamping owners to think about. How can I keep people entertained? How can I kind of plant little seeds of, inspiration? You don't need to have a full activities director, but just kind of to let people know they have choices. I think some people do get a little anxious, like, well, we have enough to do, and they will, but they just have to kind of see it on paper to feel at ease that they won't be bored and there won't be awkward, whatever.
And to that point, is there anything that you would mention to new operators specifically? Because as they're starting their operation, they typically have to take on a lot. Maybe they've had to raise money. They're finding the land, they're purchasing the land, they're doing the lease maybe on the land. They're doing the marketing side, the hospitality side. It's a lot for really anybody to handle. In particular, people who are just starting out and maybe they don't have a lot of experience in the glamping world. From an operator standpoint, is there anything that you would share with them to maybe focus on in the beginning part of them getting this proof of concept out? Maybe they'll scale their business down the road, but they've got a few units. Is there something on the hospitality side, any North Star, anything else that you would recommend that they should really stay focused on at the beginning?
So I have my North Star, but you have a North Star. So what's it going to be?
Yeah, mine, I don't even know if I would call mine a North Star, and we've never really talked about something just came to me that I think every glamping property, especially new one, but even old ones who think they're old hat and they're booked out all summer and they think they're the cat's meow, is on a guest's first night there, or even, a couple times a week, have a little campfire, beers and wine that you provide free. Some places already provide, drinks included. But if you don't, have a little campfire where you crack 3 or 4 bottles of wine and you put some beer in a cooler and meet your guests. Sit down with them like you would if you were inviting your cousin to come stay with you. And don't be like putting on airs there. Just hear what they have to say. Hear why they booked you, what they love. What could I do better? Because one, you could ask them to write a review on TripAdvisor, but that's going to be tainted. They're either going to try and be nice or they'll try and be rude if something was not to their liking. But if you get them around a campfire with a drink in their hand and they see you, well, one, you're going to learn a ton about your camp that you'd never learn from a guest book entry or talking to them without a glass of wine in their hand over the reception. How was your stay? Can you fill out this comment card? They're going to write great stay, blah, blah, blah. But you get them around the campfire. One, you're going to learn a lot about what you could do better or what things you did amazingly. And two, you're going to build just that 1 hour, even if it's from 5 to 6, we do sunset cocktails and it's my treat as the owner. you're going to build an evangelist for your brand, because that person's going to go home and be like, this guy Mike was so cool. We chatted about his trip and why he built this glamping camp, and you guys got to go there. Like, make sure you book on a Wednesday night or a Sunday night, because those are the nights where he does the little campfire, whatever. Like, I think that would be a cool way to learn truly firsthand. And that's why hopefully you're doing a glamping camp anyway, is to meet amazing people. And
we won't tell her that he just hung up.
Yeah. Mother-in-law was calling in.
But no, I think that's a really good, yes, I think it's about being personal, right? My North Star was a little higher. I do think that's like that personal touch, and that like community building is totally key, what Mike was saying. From the get-go, though, I think it can be really overwhelming. You're on Pinterest, you've gone on a rabbit hole of, now you're seeing structures that are $1 bajillion and you're intimidated, and, don't let that shake you up, right? How you differentiate is not by, one-upping your neighbor, but being you and figuring out who you are, what makes you special, what makes your land special, your journey, and kind of if you can distill it to that, no one can copy that. No one can copy your story if it's from the heart, right? So think about those little details and how to weave them into your design, your logo, your design from like an aesthetic perspective down to your website, of like sharing a little piece of you. There's if you look at the Rallian Chateau, which is like an amazing collection of properties around the world it's not a chain, it's a seal of approval. And they're totally disparate, unique places. But what is the thing that unites them? It's the idea of that it's a beautiful quote that I'm not going to do offhand, but it's basically like sharing a little piece of you, giving the keys to your guest and making them feel like
they're at home.
At home, basically. And it doesn't always need to be you physically there opening that door, but it's little touches of you just thinking of them. I think luxury is really thoughtfulness. That's what it comes down to, is like sharing a piece of you and then sharing that with a guest to make their life a little bit easier, more fun, and at ease.
Where was the first glamping experience? What country, what city?
It was Eco Camp in Argentina, Patagonia. And
right against the Fitzroy, right? Or no?
No, it was in Torres del Paine in Chile. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry, my bad. It was in Chile. Torres del Paine, Chile, at a place called Eco Camp. They do an excellent job. I think they do the domes, and they've been around a long time, and they're really leaders in sustainability. I think that also really impressed us, like how much they could do in as remote a place as Torres del Paine and have it feel totally luxurious and fabulous. And it wasn't because everything was like, fine silver and stuff. It was just, we gathered around for happy hour in the evening around the fire. We shared stories. We had incredible views. We had adventures by day. And it felt like a really robust experience that, you didn't think about the sheets once, you thought about just the content and quality of the experience.
And the sustainability side of it, as much as like, you don't want to, we don't want people greenwashing and being like, oh, we don't wash our sheets and we're like so green. But the more you can think about being environmentally friendly, the more money you're going to save in the long run, even if it's a little bit of investment up front. The more things you can talk about on social, when you meet up with other glamping property owners. And your guests are people, 90% of your guests love the outdoors a lot. And that 90% wants to protect it. So when they see you doing things that are going above and beyond and making that extra step and not single-use plastic water bottles in your environmentally, friendly lounge, they see you making these small touches like refillable jugs, and that goes a long way towards them seeing that you're more than just saying we're green, but you're acting that way.
And it's all about storytelling, because if you manage expectations of what you're giving and why you're doing that, maybe you're giving less because you're thinking about the environment, people won't be mad about it. They'll understand and they'll actually appreciate it. So it's just kind of communicating your goals, sometimes your shortcomings, whatever it is, but then guests are going to be more forgiving if they know it's for a good cause.
Gotcha. Just a few more questions here for you. Something that came to mind, this may not be the most popular question I've ever asked, but in this post-COVID world where everybody's work and travel habits have changed, we've got the vast majority of the population globally is now working from home. And so for the first time, you have couples that are now living together they're used to maybe being off at work in different offices and seeing each other on the weekends or at night, maybe not as much, but now they're literally with each other, with or without a family, 24 hours a day. And I read this stat that divorces are on the rise by a significant amount because of the COVID self-isolation. I guess my question is, you guys were self-isolating before it was, a thing, right? Just like glamping was the original self-distancing tool before it was ever a thing. You guys have been doing this now for eight years?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. How, I guess this is going to be a question that comes across, I'm sure, many couples' minds. Any advice for couples that are now going to be traveling more together? How have you not killed each other? What is it like to then, travel with each other to not only these beautiful destinations, but I think a vast majority of not only Americans, but the kind of global market has experienced what you guys have been doing for, the last 8 years. And some have done really well with it. And some are waiting for the day when the offices or, something else opens up to where they can go back in. Yeah. What are your thoughts there?
My simplest piece of couples and travel advice as it relates to being in the outdoors is you're having a fight, just hike in different directions. By the time you meet back, you'll forget about really largely what you're fighting about. I think we use that as a marital strategy and it's worked pretty well.
I would say my piece of advice is to be adaptable, to be flexible, because there's in any travel experience, even the worst travel experience of getting, lost way down the wrong way on a bus and totally missing your reservation and the site that you wanted to see, which happened to us early on in our trip. And at the time we were like sad, we were crying. We went to some little tiny vista point that was nothing like this one we read about in Lonely Planet that was like a main part of our South America journey. We missed that. But we ended up going down a wrong road, getting into a dance party with like these fully traditional dressed Peruvians that were passing us moonshine, and our taxi driver was taking photos of it. And it turned out to be one of the top 5 experiences of the entire, over 60 countries. Like that's one of our top 5 experiences, was something that in the moment we could have fought about and been like, oh, I knew you did that. Like you read the guidebook wrong and now our day sucks. And we could have gone home and moped in a hotel, but it turned into something awesome because you just need to let that magic unfold and unpack itself and know that it's there anytime you're on vacation, whether you're 30 miles away at a glamping camp from your house or 3,000 miles away on another continent. Like there's a lot of beauty and a lot of happiness to be had. You just need to be open to it and flexible and kind of let that river take you towards that.
And on that note is, I think, treat every bump in the road like a wild ride and an adventure. Laugh about it. Like that's the whole thing, is like you are going to hit bumps in the road, but I think we actually thrive in totally terrible, ridiculous situations because we find the humor in them. There it's like, okay, what do we got? What's the world throwing at us now? Like, we got this. So
roller coasters
roll with the punches.
Fun.
Yeah, roll with the punches.
Roller coasters are a lot more fun than driving along a canal or a train track at a slow, steady pace that you can't get off. And
sure,
know that you will have bumps, but don't fear them. Just ride them out and have a laugh because it's the only way to get through it.
So what's next for Honeytrek, end of 2020 into 21?
Well, to explain a little where we just came from. So we did get COVID trapped in Europe for 3 months. We just got back this week after multiple planes were canceled. Once again, that could have been terrible. We had the best time ever. We had a camper van in Poland, which let us self-isolate yet still explore. So that was amazing. And as the world was opening up a little bit, what came back first? Not the Marriott. Glamping destinations. So we actually went from Poland to Germany in a camper to a 6 camp glamping journey around Holland. And it was phenomenal. So, because everybody, I just found it was so interesting because if you had your own bathroom and you had enough outdoor space, you were allowed to be open. So life was like pretty marvelous, like being on a lake and, being in dunes. And so it was also very interesting to have more of a European glamping experience as compared to our massive, 75 camp North American glamping experience. And I'll let you know how we met this. We were actually doing, it was a massive brand launch for a company we can't tell you yet, but we met them at the Glamping Summit, a fabulous place to go if you're not all registered for the fall. And they said, hey, we saw your book. We like your style of photography. We like how you tell stories. Do you want to photograph camps around Europe for us?
To help us with this brand relaunch, which is happening first or second week in July. So
yes,
you'll see.
So they were actually a tent manufacturer who hired us. And
giving hints there.
Well, a tent's pretty, okay, sorry, glamping structure manufacturer. And we, tried to basically show how fabulous these glamping experiences can be. So that was a heck of a 3 weeks running around the Netherlands. We're really excited to share that experience. We're also excited back in the States because we're continuing work for them in the South because they have some outfitters out here.
And speaking of what else is next, for anybody who's an author out there, it's a lot of work, but shameless plug, promoting Comfortably Wild. If anybody does have a glamping camp that needs a few of these in their tents for their guests to read, we'd love to sign them for you and send them your way. And then also doing more consulting too. Ruben was very kind to introduce us to a few different people to help with their glamping camps as they get open. So we'll be doing a lot more of that this summer, sharing personalized knowledge.
Yeah, and we're always, we are perpetually in motion. We are full-time digital nomads, glampers, honeymooners, and we will probably go to our 50th state this summer. We're at 47 right now, and we're always kind of like looking out for what cool glamping properties are open. So we have our eyes for that. So there'll be some glamping in our summer. And we keep it very flexible. It works that way.
Awesome. Well, hopefully I get to see you guys in the flesh here sooner than later. Thank you very much for taking the time to tell your story. Always great to catch up. Looking forward to following your next adventure and keeping tabs on the Forever Nomads. That's awesome. And thanks for taking the time to connect.
Of course. Thanks for having us on. That was a blast.
Again, and as always, thanks for hanging out with us today. I'm your host, Ruben Martinez. Special thanks to our guests, Mike and Ann Howard. For more information around events and news in the industry, please visit AmericanGlampingAssociation.net or contact info@AmericanGlampingAssociation.net. Until next time.